how do you define happiness for yourself? How do you do that? And there's another exercise that we do in Atticus when we haven't done it in a while, but you kind of think forward to what it is. What's your definition of success? I drew on that. What's my definition of happiness? If I am not happy now, what does it look like in the future when I am happy? What does that look like? And what I can draw on, of course, is when I was happy in the past, this is what was going on. We can't always go backwards in time, but we can draw on the experience of life. So, okay, I'm going to draw on that to then push that forward and say, what can I take the good out of that and bring it forward? And what else do I want to see? Maybe that wasn't happening in the past, but I still like to see it in the future.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hey, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we're just going to do that. We're going to wrestle with having a great life that supports a great practice. And we're going to do some jujitsu in that way. So today I've invited a good friend, a colleague, a really respected member of Dominate Your Market, and a very respected member of the California Bar, my dear friend, Kevin Snyder. So Kevin, welcome to the episode.
Thank you, Steve. What a kind and warm introduction. That makes me very happy, which I know is what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, isn't it? So today I've asked you to come on to talk about something that you have called the Happiness Advantage Scorecard. Now, I just want to spend a few minutes to talk to you about the definition of happiness, because this is one of the things that in the past couple of decades of coaching, advising, being an attorney myself, that I've seen us wrestle with as professionals, as attorneys. And the thing that brings a lot of lawyers to Atticus is I want to make more money. I want to have less stress. I want to have a better practice. But what usually keeps lawyers part of the Atticus community is the conversation of constantly working on a great life. Now, one of the things I will have, and I will get feedback, negative feedback, where people will say, oh my gosh, another conversation on happiness. Why are we talking about happiness? Why are we talking about mental wellness? Why are we talking about this? So the question is really to you, why is this important to you as an attorney, as a leader in our community, as a leader in your community, as a member of a large board at a major hospital, as a owner of a law firm? Why did you create a scorecard? Like, tell me the story behind it. What was the challenge? What was going on?
Well, first, let me just confess that I was one of those people that came for the money, but staying for the happiness of the great life. So I think that's important. And we talk a lot about that in Atticus, about, people come in for the money, but then they stay for the great life. And it's so true, because that's my journey in Atticus. And there is a direct correlation between how well my practice, and I say my practice, I have an awesome partner in crime, my wife, Carolyn. So our practice, there's a direct correlation with our happiness in our journey, our mutual happiness, individual happiness, happiness together, and how well we do in our practice. And so times I don't have the data points or graph to show you, but I can just tell you anecdotally that looking at times in which we struggled financially in the practice, or there was some sort of struggle or tension within the practice, it was because it was at times that we look at in our life that we were struggling as well. And the converse is true. So it's super, super important. And that is the direct tie into this journey of why I created this happiness scorecard. Is last year was one of those major dips in our practice, because there was a major dip in my personal life. I was at probably the lowest point. Well, not probably the lowest point that I've ever been in my life, from a mental perspective, from a health perspective overall, because mental health is your health, but physically wasn't healthy either. And I was extremely depressed, and not just, oh, I'm feeling depressed. Like, we're going to open up the dictionary and look up the word depressed as clinically depressed. So, I was at a point that was just, I'd never experienced before, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get over things. People that knew me didn't know what was going on. And it was challenging, and it was affecting our practice, the way in which we were working with clients, we were working as a team. I became very isolated, or I isolated myself, and I didn't want to go networking. I didn't even want to come to work. I didn't want to visit with clients. And, my team tells me I did a good job masking a lot of that in the office with clients. Like, they would have no idea. But that was so draining. Like, I would come home and I'd just be totally wiped. Imagine your busiest day at your best moment, whether you're in the office, you're in trial, you still come home tired. It's mentally exhausting. On top of that, if you're trying to be someone you're not at that moment, it's like 3 times as tiring. And then I didn't want to get out of bed. On top of that, just because I was depressed. So that got to a point where, what can I do differently? And there's a larger conversation here, of course, that we're not going to get into today. It's beyond the scope, but just taking one part of it was, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with my life. I'm not happy in life. Nothing makes me happy. And the scariest part, Steve, was when I couldn't laugh at stand-up comedy anymore, or something funny that my kids were doing. I couldn't join in the laughter of family time. I was at a big family gathering. I married into a large Catholic family, and there's 12. My in-laws say that we have 12 kids, 6 of our biological kids, and then their spouses, and we love to play cards. So the 14 of us are, my mother and father-in-law, and the other 12, or including myself, are sitting down at their long table in their house playing cards, and everyone's laughing except me. And no one's noticing that, really, but except me. I'm like, I don't find this funny. Not that I don't think it's funny intellectually. I know it's funny, but I can't laugh. I don't have this emotion. It's a dearth of emotion. And I'm watching stand-up comedy. And I'm trying to now. This is like a drug. Okay, this is going to stimulate me. I'm listening to all my favorite comedians, and nothing is triggering anything. And I got scared. Like, oh my gosh, it's like, people lost a sense of smell when they got COVID. I lost laughter. I lost happiness in this. And so I was freaked out and trying to figure out what to do. And that's really the launch pad of all of this. Moving from there, working with my therapist, working with my psychiatrist, working with you, frankly, and other people in DYM, just trying to move forward. And then what can we focus on? And that is really what the driver was, and looking at the happiness scorecard. And what Atticus teaches, if you can't improve and progress if you can't measure. So thinking about that, usually we're thinking about, KPIs, key performance indicators in our practice, like, how many people we're meeting with, what our conversion rate is, what our profit margins, all that jazz, which is super important. But there isn't an indicator for happiness. How do you define happiness even? I still remember when I mentioned this idea to you initially, you said to me, and you said, well, you're going to have to figure out a way in which you can measure and score happiness. And as soon as you said it, I was like, oh, crap. How the heck am I going to do that? Like, how do you define happiness? And so that is the pickup point of where this all came up from, is trying to define happiness for me.
That's perfect. That's perfect. I want to spend a moment on one thing, but I don't want to get bogged down on it. This is a really important conversation for me because of the statistics in the legal industry. And the statistics are pretty brutal. I've talked about them before, is that 1 out of 2 lawyers is expressing a high level of burnout. So if they're asked, are you burned out? 1 out of 2 will say, I am burned out. Number 2, our depression and anxiety levels are 4 times of the national average, and suicide rates are 3 times the national average. So we're really having a crisis inside our own community that's eating us alive from the inside, and we're afraid to talk about it. So I really appreciate your courage to come and talk about it. I usually call it, when somebody's in that spot, I call it the pit of despair. And you can't get out of the pit of despair by wishing. You can't get out of the pit of despair by thinking your way through it. When people like Robin Williams commit suicide, who is a celebrity, wealthy, well-known movie star, a very, very funny person, right? Then it really gives you the ability to understand that when you get to a certain point, you are too impaired to understand. You're cognitively and emotionally impaired to understand that you are now in the pit of despair. So I really appreciate you having the courage to come on and talk about it, because it takes some courage to say, hey, look, I came for the money, which you got. I stayed for the great life, but somewhere along the process, the wheels kind of came off my emotional wagon, my happiness wagon. And for whatever reasons, they came off. So today's conversation, and the reason you and I are having with, and hopefully people from the audience will look at this and listen to it, as that you have kind of two levels of this emotion. And there's an emotional awareness around what happiness is, an emotional awareness around gratitude. There's emotional awareness around contentment. So I like scorecards, and I like what you've done here, because it requires you to ask some serious questions of yourself. And, I'm sure there's somebody laughing somewhere, like, give it to two lawyers to figure out a way of scoring happiness. But it's really one lawyer, one human being, asking themselves, what does happiness look like to me? What are the behaviors that I have to put in my life? What are the habits I have to put in my life? What are the structures I have to put in my life? And what are the expectations in my heart and soul about what happiness looks like to me? So as you listen to this as an audience member, I'm going to invite you to listen from Kevin's journey and Kevin's exploration. And Kevin's going to walk through some of the criteria that he determined for happiness. But I'm going to ask you to listen from your perspective, whether that criteria works for you. And of course, we're going to give you a copy, right, Kevin? We're giving everybody the copy of version. This is version, 3 or 4 of the scorecard?
A 4. I think you have 4. That's
version 4.0. Yep. And I would imagine 6 months to a year we'll have 5.0. But talk to me about the thinking when you started this. So you were like, okay, I'm gonna, I think Steve's a little nutty sometimes, but I think I'm gonna go for a scorecard. So talk to me about that process.
Sure. So, first, let me say I totally agree with the pit of despair, and this. And I'm a visual person. Most people are visual learners, and so I think of emoticons, and so that's why on the scorecard I used emoticons to kind of indicate the scoring from 1 to 5, and I associated it with emoticon. So I work better with emoticons, but when you're doing numbers, obviously, or metrics, KPIs, having an actual number is what helps. So I did both. So that it just helped me better identify. But the pit of despair, the analogy or the picture for me when you say that is, I think of falling down a well and just being stuck at the bottom of the well. And gosh, when I was a kid, there was that young kid who fell down the well in Texas, and that was all over the news. And that kid was too young and impaired and stuck and wedged in there, couldn't get out of the well by himself or herself. I forget what the gender of the child was, but it required a whole community to get that child out. And that's what I needed. It wasn't just me. It's not just this scorecard that like saved my bacon in this. There's a whole community involved, from first my wife, my kids. We didn't protect our kids from this situation, and we fully informed them, appropriately. They're a little bit older. They're middle school and high school, and so they can handle some more of the truth about what was happening. To my team, couldn't do it without my team. We didn't shield them from what was going on, and we couldn't have done it without them. To a larger community of family, friends, and our Atticus Atticusins. I mean, that was just instrumental. So pull that all together pulls me out of the well. But to answer your question, because as lawyers, we like to divert ourselves. So to go back to your question, it was, all right, well, how do you define happiness for yourself? How do you do that? So I took your challenge to me back home, and there's another exercise that we do in Atticus when we haven't done it in a while, but you kind of think forward to what it is. What's your definition of success? So that kind of, I drew on that. What's my definition of happiness? If I am not happy now, what does it look like in the future when I am happy? And feeling happy. What does that look like? And what I can draw on, of course, is when I was happy in the past, this is what was going on. And then, we can't always go backwards in time, but we can draw on the experience of life. So, okay, I'm going to draw on that to then push that forward and say, what can I take the good out of that and bring it forward? And what else do I want to see? Maybe that wasn't happening in the past, but I still like to see it in the future. So fast forward 6 months to a year from now. Of course, this exercise was 90 days. It was part of my 90-day focus. So I was like, fast forward 90 days from now, what does my life look like if I can say I am feeling happy? And that was the goal, was to feel happy 51% of the time, whether it's 51% of the day, 51% of the grouping of 3 months. More than half the time I'd be happy. And that'd be a huge advantage for me, or be a huge growth for me, because I wasn't happy. I was happy 0% of the time. So I looked at, okay, these are the things that I recognize now that made me happy, and here are the other things I want to do. So 90 days from now, I'm doing all these things that don't make me happy. I'm just happy, and my life is like, this is what it looks like. So I started with that. This is what my life looks like if I'm happy, and then how do I measure that? And then, okay, we break down, well, what am I doing? Okay, we're going to create a metric for that. Am I doing those things? And then, for example, I have a miracle morning exercise in the past that I would do, and when I was successful. Was it a direct correlation? I couldn't tell you, but I know that I was doing this miracle morning exercise, and I was also successful and happy. So there's obviously some connection. I don't know how to describe it, but there is. And so I need to continue to go back to doing that. So what was it about the miracle morning exercise that worked for me or didn't work for me? So let's make it even better, but I got to do that. So, okay, am I doing miracle morning? What does miracle morning look like? Let's break that down so then I can categorize it. If I'm scoring 1 to 5, then I have to describe what a 1 looks like on miracle morning. It's a crappy miracle morning. I didn't do my miracle morning. That's a 1. And drawing on my therapist, he said, you don't want to start with a 0 ever. I said, I like starting with a 1 because you're always achieving something at the very least. Even if you're not doing it, you're still getting a 1. So you're still moving the needle. You're not saying, I'm getting 0, I'm getting an F. It's not about, it's like not a pass fail. It's just, hey, you've made some progress. The progress is you're thinking about the fact that you didn't do it. So that's progress. So you should get a 1. You shouldn't get a 0. You should get a 1. But a 5 is, I did my miracle morning and all of the elements of the miracle morning. I check. I did it. And I didn't do it with like this. I did it naturally. That's a 5. And then everything in between.
So let's talk about just for a moment, so I can frame it out for everybody, and so they can visualize it, because there's somebody on a treadmill, somebody walking their dog, somebody driving.
Mm-hmm.
So this is basically an 11 by 17 scorecard, and all across the top, it has score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so score 1 is the pit of despair. It's a frowny face, more or less, unhappy, right? But why don't you describe the little emoticons? Because tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 look like. So when people are looking at this, they'll get what your thinking was here.
Sure. So the emoticon on number 1 is like a big frowny face with the wide eyes, like something is you saw that you just couldn't believe that was horrible. You just saw a horrible thing. That's the face that you give. Number 2 is the frowny face, as I'm sad. 3 is the meh face, or what the kids say, mid. Just, I have a straight line across mouth, no smile, but no frown either. Number 4 is a smiley face, typical smiley face. Number 5 is a smiley face so big you can see teeth. So you're so happy that you're smiling big.
Okay. So our score 1 is more or less unhappy or frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
2 is maybe mildly sad. 3 is neutral, like, man, we're in between. 4 is I'm maybe happy, and 5 might be joyful, maybe even blissful. Correct. So we have category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So imagine that in your head as we're talking about that. The other thing, before I want to walk through the criteria you establish, and then we'll go across to Miracle Morning as an example. I think that's a great one to go with. I want you to listen. If as a listener, I want you to listen from the perspective of two things. I'm listening to Kevin, and he did two things just absolutely brilliantly. Number one is he took responsibility for his own happiness. This is an important thing because a lot of people don't take responsibility for their own happiness. They shift the responsibility to other people. And you can see people who are chronically unhappy in blaming other people for their lack of happiness. So one of the things that's brilliant about this is, Kevin, you said, I own my own happiness and I will be responsible for my own happiness. So number two, that puts you into a position where strategically you're thinking about, how do I proactively design a life that includes happiness versus reactively having spontaneous moments of happiness that occur occasionally. So what you've done is you've elevated the concept of life by design into a framework that allows you to identify behaviors, routines, habits, and experiences that you think are important for your own personal happiness. So I just want to spend a moment there before we get too deep into the scorecard, because people sometimes will look at the scorecard but not really appreciate what you've done here, because you own your own happiness. Like, I'm responsible, nobody else. My wife's not, my kids aren't, Steve's not. I'm responsible for my happiness, and I need to know what that looks like to me. And two, strategically, if I'm going to live a life by design, not one by default, one in which I take ownership of my own future, what does that look like to me? So I want everybody, as you listen to Kevin defining this, I want you to understand this is a very strange, unique, and powerful conversation around life design, maturity around what you want in your life, how to manage your expectations of life, and really breaking free of the gravitational pull of normal behavior where you would blame somebody else for your lack of happiness. You're actually saying, I will own, design, drill for the oil of my own happiness in my own future, so to speak. Probably not the best metaphor, but the one that came to my mind. Does that make sense to you, Kevin? What are your thoughts on that before we go through the criteria?
Yeah, completely. I mean, there's an infamous phrase that many of us know: you got to own your stuff. Except we use a different word that begins with S. So that's so true. And I'm a big movie buff, and I relate movies to my life every day, particularly comedies. And so Jim Carrey in Liar Liar, he has this horrible habit of over promises and never meets expectations, and so he's a liar, right? So he's trying to break that habit, and he is charmed now with always telling the truth. And so that's the funny part of the movie. But there's a scene that he is in the bathroom out in the courthouse, and he is bleeding and bruised up, and he's all by himself, and he's slamming his head in the wall and all this stuff. And this guy walks in and goes, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And he says, "I'm kicking my butt." Of course, the A word. This is a family show, so we'll keep it clean. And that's exactly what you have to do. You have to kick your own butt. You're the only one. You got all these people, and like Jim Carrey, his character in the movie, he's got his ex-wife is trying to help him. All these other people are trying to help him, and he doesn't respond. The only time he actually responds is when he is invested. And so I had to kick my own butt. My example of being stuck in the well, I couldn't do it without others. I need other people's help. That gave me the freedom and the space to be able to kick my own butt. I could only kick my own butt because I had other people covering for me. I got people taking the load off me in a lot of other areas of my life, so I can have that time to really kick my own butt in this area. So that's what started it off. I have to own this.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And you also have to own that you're worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the core challenges that sometimes I hear members of our community will say that, well, I'm not good enough or I'm not worth it. And that's exactly when you need to say, no, actually, I am worth it. And that's the pivot point for a lot of people. And the pivot point is defining what worth it looks like to you. So let's walk through the criteria. And then if we've got the time, we'll have you score just for fun so people can get a sense of this. We'll take one criteria and take it apart. So we're going for if you're listening to this, we've talked about the 1 through 5 across the top. Now we're going down to the left-hand column. That would be, if you're looking at a report card, it might be, if you're like in elementary school, it might be language arts or English, math, PE. So it's got your what you're scoring on the left-hand side. So we're going to go right down the left-hand side to talk about what Kevin's scoring. So sorry, Kevin, go please.
Sure. So there's 11 of these categories that, there's no rhyme or reason here. I didn't say, I have to have X amount. It just kind of organically developed. So if other people are trying to do this at home and of course, encourage this activity, 11 is, there's no magic number here. It's whatever works for you and what you're thinking and trying to score. So for me, that's just 11. And I'm continuing looking at it and going, well, do I need to add another one? Do I need to delete one? So it's going to change. Just the fact is, you're coming up with these categories that are important to you that you want to score. So for me, it's number 1 is clean sleep. I try to make them kind of catchy and fun so I remember them and it's not boring. So am I getting good sleep hygiene?
Okay, almost hold on, stop there. Why is that one important? So I just want to spend a moment. I want, from your perspective, it may be obvious to other people, but why was this number 1 in your mind?
And number 1 is it's directly correlated to depression. You aren't, just clinically speaking, you're not going to get out of your depression if you're not getting enough sleep. And you're going to more likely to be depressed if you're not getting enough sleep. Your sleep hygiene is not just one thing. It also affects your body's metabolism, your mental state in general, your processing, executive functioning, decision-making skills, but your metabolism, how your body is, whether it's healthy or not. It's related to cancer. And the number 1 thing right now that's just in my mind, because I work in elder law and work with a lot of seniors, is that there's a direct correlation now through studies to dementia. And so that is why sleep is so important. Everyone's sleep number is different, like your sleep number on your bed, but the recommendation is between 7 and 9 hours of sleep.
Okay, this is perfect. So for those of you that are going, what's it have to do with making more money? Funny enough, one of the things I try and do with lawyers who are trying to make more money, they ask me, what's the number 1 piece of advice I can give you? I'm like, I can give them. I'm like, get a full night's sleep consistently, because then you can perform at a higher level on a regular basis. You can't outrun fatigue. You just can't, because it's inside your own brain. You just can't outrun it. You can't outrun burnout. So I think this was a great one. So sorry, Kevin. Let's go to number 2.
Hydration station. So making sure I'm getting enough water. This is why I have the water in my mug here to drink. And I realized I wasn't getting enough water during the day. I'm sitting in a room talking to people most of the day and not drinking enough. And so you get tired. Your body needs water. Your body's made up 80% water. You can be overhydrated. There are serious cases of that, but that's very, very unlikely. And more likely that you're not hydrated enough. The next is Miracle Morning, which I think we'll come back to and talk a little bit more detail. It's what my daily habit to start my day. Meditate to levitate is, am I taking some time to meditate during the day? Trying to come up with a scorecard around that. Meditation could be a guided meditation. It could just be my own personal meditation, but am I just taking some time away to do that? Exercise. I didn't make that one any catchier. It's just exercise. Cards and calls. That's, am I reaching out to other people? Am I having the connection with other people? This was a habit that I had before that I really enjoy. I really enjoy reaching out and bringing joy to other people by a simple phone call to connect or a card in the mail. Because who gets good mail these days? It's either politics or bills. So here's a good mail.
This one I want to stay on for a second, because this one's very interesting to me, because this is a proactive gratitude practice. And if I look at your cards and calls, what you're trying to do every day, and you'll have to correct me if this is not true, Kevin, but what you're trying to do every day is you're trying to reach out and proactively communicate with somebody that you care about, or somebody that matters to you, and either dropping them a card. And you're a great cartoonist. I've gotten some of your cards. You're a great cartoonist. And you're a contributor. You always look to help other people. So the cards and calls, well, that's what it's called. It's really a proactive gratitude practice. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, yeah. So that's kind of where it draws from. Sometime, half the time, it's my gratitude in the morning is about a person, and I'm like, oh, well, I should give them a call, or I should drop them a card. So
Perfect.
yeah, and that the connection here is really important. So I was very isolated, and this is why there's such a lot of talk around people that are in prison not being in isolation, or just being isolated in general when you're depressed. Seniors that are living alone, it's why there's a larger mortality rate or a suicide rate amongst individuals that are isolated, because we're human beings. We're made to be social animals, whether you're introverted or extroverted naturally. We're social beings, and we can't thrive if we don't have some level of human connection.
And it really sucks because as an introvert, it's the thing I hate the most about being a human being, is that I need other human beings. I know it sounds stupid, but it's the thing that makes me absolutely crazy because we are independent creatures. We collaborate, we work together, we play together. We're working communities. The Atticus is a community, a very unique community unto itself. So this practice is a phenomenally unique and fun one. So I really like it. I really appreciate it. What's your next criteria here?
Next one is night recap. So it's kind of a play on nightcap. Trying to have less alcohol in my life. So not necessarily what am I drinking at night, but what has my day been like? Am I spending just 5 minutes just sitting down and recapping my day? It could be as simple as, was this a good day, and why? And that's it. Just kind of put bookends on my day. I'm starting my day with a certain exercise, ending my day with a certain exercise. It helps with the racing mind syndrome at night, which was invading my sleep when I was having more insomnia. Some of that's due to medication. Those people that are out there listening that take medication, and some of that's byproduct, and you kind of have to balance that. A lot of times it's just your mind hasn't had a chance to actually settle down. So having some nighttime routine where you're getting ready to go to sleep will actually improve your sleep and the cleanliness of your sleep hygiene. So that was what this is all about. The next is tackle tolerations. So this was born out of a Atticus practice of, hey, let's jot down all the things that are bugging you during the day. Like you see something in your house. Again, the movie analogy from National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, when Clark gets the chainsaw and lops off the newel post. He says, I finally fixed the newel post. We all have this newel post in our life, the thing that is wiggly and not working. They'll change the light bulb in the ceiling. Some of it's like really simple, like why the heck didn't you do that before? But you let this go on for months and you just let it aggravate you. You say, I'll do it later. I can't do it now. So what are all those things? And make that long list, because it's long. No matter who you are, you have a long one. Even if you don't realize it, as you start writing, it will get long. And then you just periodically knock them off. And you feel so good when you accomplish that, even if it's a small thing like changing a light bulb, which that was me in our family room. There was this light bulb that kept like flickering, and it took literally 6 months to change the darn thing. But once I did, I was like, yes. I thought I had to go to Home Depot to get a special light, but we had it in the garage the whole time. We had an extra one. I didn't know that because I was like, I'll go to Home Depot later. But then I was like, I'm going to get this done. Maybe just go look in the garage to see if we have one. Oh, we do. Boom. Like 5-minute activity. Done.
10 hours thinking about it and 2 minutes doing it, right?
Exactly. How many lawyers does it take to change the light bulb?
I was going to go there, but you beat me to it.
So that one's huge. Next is family time is the best time. So, purpose in life for me, the number one vocation outside of being a husband was being a father. I have a great father and had a great father growing up, and I just wanted to be like him. And that was what I wanted to do. So, trying to grow a practice and owning your own business, you end up working long hours, and then you easily get away from family. You easily start putting time. You're just saying prioritize. This is more important because I will make money to then do the things that I want to do for my family later. Well, what about right now? So you're going to wake up one day, the kids are going to be out the door, and then you're like, I finally got the money to do things, and then they're not going to want to spend time with you, or they don't have time to. You don't have to develop those relationships during formative time. And of course, then you're just unhappy because you're at work and it's 8 o'clock at night and you're like, shoot, I want to be home, but I got to do this. Well, you don't have to do it. You're choosing to do it. So how do I measure being at home with my family, which is what I really want to do?
Well, let's stay there for a second. So for the listeners, there are two things I'm going to encourage you to listen for in your own mind. One is called, I'm just going to call it the provider trap. And Kevin alluded to it, which is I have to be the provider so my family understands the sacrifices I'm taking to be away from them so I can be a good provider. Generally, this is a very powerful lie we tell ourselves because generally speaking, the families don't feel that way. So it's kind of a rationalization or justification. So I'm going to encourage you that if that comes up for you, that you may want to check in on that. Because I know, like Kevin, you're a hyper conscientious guy. And so a lot of us are hyper conscientious people because we wouldn't be successful at what we're doing if we weren't. I want you to think about if you're having a response to Kevin's conversation here and you're feeling a little uncomfortable, that you might be wrestling a little bit with the provider trap. The second thing I want you to think about as you listen to this is how can I structure my week? How can I structure my great week? Those of you that are Atticus members, my time template, where the first appointments that I make, my first commitments over a month, my first commitments over a quarter are the commitments to my family. So you put those big rocks in first, so to speak. So the family time is the best time, is a terrific one, and one that is an anchor for you, like it's a pivot point for you. So I really like this one. Anything else you want to say about this one before we go to the next one? And the next one it is a clean show, so I'm just going to warn you about the next one.
Real brief. I love this about you, Steve. I love this, how you bring this to Atticus, is you kind of label things like the provider syndrome, right?
We're calling it a provider trap. And
trap.
I don't know if it's a syndrome. It's not a syndrome. It's more of a trap. It's it's an emotional trap of how do I perceive myself, and it's in your own head. I know it because I know it well, and I have had the conversations with other people about it. But you have it. You have to be careful because once you fall into that trap, it owns you.
For sure.
You rationalize and justify it.
Which is great that you call it a trap. And I love that about you because it's so visual, right? So, and if you haven't already trademarked it, then go ahead and do that. We all know lawyers that can help you. The concept here for me, my provider trap, what I call it is the suffer-lata syndrome. So I chose to use a syndrome, the suffer-lata syndrome. It's my grandmother in her slightly broken Portuguese English saying, I suffer a lot. And she would always say to me growing up, Kevin, I suffer a lot, and then explain why she suffered a lot. Like, what are the sacrifices? These are the sacrifices that I made. And granted, my grandmother, Mom, if you're listening, I love Vavakina. She gave up a lot to move to this country and bring an entire family over and work her butt to the bone to provide for the life that I'm able to have now. And there was that sacrifice mentality, the immigrant mentality, the American dream. And she quote, had to do that in order to get the next generations to where they were, but that carries forward. So anyone coming from first generation, second, third generation immigrant family, which is a lot of people, can recognize that and appreciate that kind of I have to sacrifice so the next generation can prosper mentality. And that's the suffer-a-lot syndrome that you fall into.
Let's stay there for a second because that's fascinating. I mean, I like that. And I think probably 50, 60, maybe 70% of our client base can relate to that, and, you throw in, you're German Portuguese, right?
Yes. Yeah. Let's not forget about Dad. He's German, right? Both immigrant families on both sides.
Yeah. Immigrant families on both sides and Catholic too, right?
Yes.
And you were, yeah. And how did you meet your wife? Let's talk about that. Cause that was a Jesuit event that you met your wife at, right?
Yes, we did the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which is a year of service, and it was broken up in communities. And we didn't know each other. I grew up on the East Coast, went to Boston College. She grew up in LA, went to Loyola Marymount University, and we were randomly selected to be in this community of 5 people together in Richmond, Virginia. So, and then she was a volunteer teacher at an inner city school. I worked at Legal Aid working with homeless. And our other 3 community members did other various volunteer things, and we lived together for a year. and we made $80 a month. We had to learn how to live off of that.
Yeah, $80 a month. And that's how you met your wife, and who is a remarkable person. I've nicknamed her. I've given her a terrible nickname just because she is a troublemaker. She's got quite the personality, and she's not afraid to say what's coming from her heart and her mind at any given time. And she's an authentic, sweet, powerful woman. And so I've nicknamed her Trouble, because she does cause trouble, and she does create a little bit of trouble, and she's not afraid of a little controversy, right?
Correct. That's great.
Hey, Steve, I just want to talk to you for a minute about probably my favorite workshop to teach right now. It's called The Path to a Great Practice and a Great Life. So it doesn't matter if you're a member or if you're new to Atticus, this is a perfect place to come and start your journey of what a great practice and a great life looks like to you. There are 4 elements to the workshop. The first is about your income. If you're going to have a great practice and a great life, you're going to need some cash. One of the questions I always get asked is there a shortcut? Is there a quicker and easier way of making more money? There is, but there's a catch to it. In order to make more money, you want to study how other lawyers have increased the income and the growth of their practice. One of the things we've done at Atticus for the past 35 years is study what the top 20% earners, 10% earners, and ultimately, what do the top 1% earners do? One of the things that we do is reveal and look at what are the 4 core strategies of a top 1% attorney, and how you can learn from that 1%er in increasing your practice. And that can be your shortcut. To grow your practice faster, you need to have a bold vision for what your life looks like. The wind in your sails for growth is ultimately the vision of what a great life looks like. In my experience, lawyers that have a terrific, powerful vision for a great life will grow a great practice quicker, faster, and more efficiently than those who don't. It's one thing to have a dream. It's another thing to take action and build foundations under that dream. That's the next thing that we'll work on the workshop. What are the steps you're going to take immediately from the workshop to start building on your vision of a great life and great practice? So if you're a fan of the conversation of what a great practice and great life looks like, this is the greatest opportunity for you to take action now and register for the workshop so we can work together on taking your vision of your great practice and great life and making it come to life. A link to register is included in the show notes, as well as a longer video by me explaining each element of the workshop. If you're a member of Atticus, it's included already in your membership. If you're new to Atticus, I'm giving you a promo code that will take $500 off. All you have to do is click the link below and put in podcast 500, and it'll get you the discount. So hit the link, register for the workshop. I look forward to seeing you there. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So we all get hand-me-down things from our folks. And so what you inherited, whether you realized it or not, the Cephalata conversation is a fairly big one. So you throw in some good Catholic guilt, you throw in the German work ethic, throw in the Portuguese Cephalata, and that's a pretty rich concoction of martyrdom and suffering mixed together. It's pretty good. I mean, I recognize the Catholic one pretty well, and I recognize the German one very, very well. What you're actually starting to do is you're trying to break a family legacy of saying, I'm going to suffer a lot for my family, and instead I'm going to flip the currency here, and I'm going to express gratitude for what I got. So when I get up in the morning and what I'm doing today and what I'm teaching my children, you are teaching your children, is how to have a happy life. And we're going to break the suffer a lot of curse once and for all. I mean, as I listen to you, I'm like, what you're doing, I hope you see what you're doing. I don't know if you see it the way I see it, but what you're doing is brilliant. And it's going to reverse the suffer a lot of curse that's been passed down from one generation to the next. Doesn't mean there wasn't suffering. But if Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, can find meaning inside a prison camp, in Auschwitz, you can find meaning in anything. And it's really choosing what that meaning is going to be. So I love this conversation. I did not anticipate this. This is really interesting to me, Kevin. Really, really well done. What are your thoughts on this?
Interesting that you bring up Viktor Frankl. I mean, that's just a seminal book in my life. Thank you to both my high school English lit teacher and then also to, in Boston College, where the philosophy is a core requirement. And in that year of philosophy, 2 semesters you have to take, that is required reading. And for good reason, for the reasons that you mentioned. And it's amazing that an individual like Viktor Frankl, then I also have read this past year. I don't know why, it just kind of came up. And I think it was because Misery Loves Company at the beginning of the year. My journey began like 2 years ago, really, and really hit the lowest point probably about last summer. But so beginning of this year, I'm still coming out of that hole. And I started reading a lot of books about the Holocaust and people's firsthand accounts about being in Auschwitz, including, I don't remember the title of the book. Maybe you can put it in show notes later for people. It's the only prisoner, it was a man who escaped from Auschwitz. And he writes a book about his experience. Now, there's another gentleman who also wrote a book, or a book was written about him that escaped, but he kept going back. He would only escape for periods of time because he was in love with one of the German commandant's daughters, and he would go out for liaisons and come back. Interesting. Another interesting book, another show note. But the only man who ever escaped gave a really harrowing personal account that he wrote immediately after he was back in safety, so he wouldn't forget. Not that you would ever forget these things, but you might want to block them out of your mind. But he got them down so it could go and be told across the world. It's not something that was revealed 50 years later, or something that he put out there and like right away. And it's disgusting, horrible. But you learn about his life, and then like Viktor Frankl, like all the things that he achieved later, and the happiness that he found despite the horrible situation, the unfathomable situation experience that he went through, and the loss that just would crush anybody else, and you wouldn't want to live. They were able to survive that. So in a weird way, like I read it because, I think I was tied to it because of the misery component. In a weird way, it was also inspiring as well. If these people could get through these horrible things, then my situation, which is not that, I'm not in a concentration camp, I can certainly kick my own butt and get out of this.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, you said, okay, there's far worse situations in life other than where I'm at. And so I need to learn from other people who climbed out of other worse situations and kick my own butt and take these lessons. So it's very powerful. So I have a Viktor Frankl quote for you. Ready?
Hit me.
Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Which is really what you've kind of done here with your happiness scorecard. You're choosing your own way and saying, these are the practices for me to choose my own way. So well done. I've got one last criteria that we haven't covered. Remembering that this is a clean show and my daughter's ultimately editing this, talk to me about the last criteria, romancing the stone.
Romancing the Stone, play off the movie. Romancing the Stone is about my connection with my wife. We joke when I shared this in the past to others and at DYM and Atticus, kind of made a joke about it, that one of the criteria is like number 2 day. If I have a number 2 day, that means I've kissed my wife for at least 6 seconds, because there's actually some studies around the length of your kiss, that how impactful it is to you, and this concept of touch. Now, some people have a love language that involves touch. My wife's is not. Hers is acts of service. Mine is touch. So how do we kind of exist in that when we have 2 different love languages? But if a kiss is not going to just be a quick peck on the lips, it doesn't have to be a huge French kiss. Just a kiss for 6 seconds and hold it actually has more power to you emotionally than anything shorter. And certainly bonus area if it's longer than that. So the joke is that's number 2. So then, and I call that first base. So you can imagine what 3, 4, and 5, right?
Yeah, I was there when you presented this. It was caused all kinds of controversy.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not actually what the scorecard. Those that are listening, if you get to see this later, you will see that that's not what's there. It is about connecting on deeper levels than just the physical connection. We've been married for 18 years. We've known each other for 23, which is more than half of my life. I've known my wife and vice versa. And you go through periods of time when you're connected or not connected. Those of you that are in long relationships understand that, know that. And what is it that you're going to do to recycle your relationship in a way? So what are the things that can be done that make this fresh, fun, new, and you feel really, really connected? And so that's the scoring. And so important because as a parent, never mind a business owner, as a parent, they're all going to leave the nest, at least that we want them to, right? If they come home and stay at home with a parent, that's okay too. But the idea is we're trying to launch them off into life, and they're going to go have their own lives, even if they're living at home. We're not going to see them a lot. So it's just going to be the two of us at some point. The empty nest syndrome, where you see a lot of that gray divorce that gets talked about, couples that are divorcing later in life after kids leave because they don't know each other anymore. It was all about the kids, and they can co-parent very well, but they got away from themselves. So this is super, super vital to my happiness. Is it all started with me meeting this beautiful woman in August 16th, 2001. And the irony is, because she does cause trouble, she likes to tell people that she didn't think I was very good looking when we first met. And I didn't think that she was good looking. And I had another girlfriend and all this business, but that's the trouble aspect. But the point is that if we can't be those two crazy kids in spirit now or in the future, then it's all going to fall apart. So we don't want to do that. And the last criteria is actually me time, which is super important. It's okay to have a little time by yourself. And that's part of the guilt part that goes in. And there's been a couple different articles about this in the New York Times. There's an opinion piece from the end of August. And then there's another follow-up opinion piece about it a couple days ago. The parent guilt and the helicopter parenting is kind of tied to guilt and being over involved in your child's life, and the importance of child being by themselves and not having a parent around. And the only reason why we're around is because we feel a lot of guilt to be super and over involved parents. And so it's okay to step away. And I was realizing that I was not taking time to just go read a book. I wasn't taking time to go on a walk, never mind just exercise. That didn't count. If I go exercise, that falls in the exercise category. But if I went on like a hike to go be in nature, or a long bike ride, reading a book, listening to a podcast, going out to the movies by myself, which I used to think was weird, but I think it's like the best thing in the world. You're by yourself anyway in the dark, so what does it matter? Going out to get a drink with a buddy, that sort of stuff. That's me time, and that's super important. That's not time with Carolyn. That's not time with the kids. It's either time by myself or with somebody else. That's me time. And I got to measure that, or else that's all going to fall apart. So, you got to put the oxygen mask on first when you're in an airplane, right? To help somebody else. They tell you that for a reason. So I can't help anybody else. I can't be a great husband. I can't be a great father. I can't be a great leader. I can't be a great business owner if I'm not taking that me time.
If you're depleted, you can't contribute.
Right.
And that's one of the great things about this. So let's talk about one criteria going from left to right, if you're okay, just for fun. And we'll start with, if it's okay with you, let's do Miracle Morning, because I think that's one that I personally really like. And I think it's one that other people can relate to. And I'd like you to walk us through that. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, let's start with number 1.
Sure. So Miracle Morning, by the way, it's inspired by, there's a book called Miracle Morning, and I forget the author's name. And he describes his process of what he does that got him out of the misery he was experiencing at the time. And so this is adopting a morning routine, whatever your morning ritual is. So for me, number 1 is I got up too late to do my Miracle Morning, my morning ritual. My morning's frantic, and I'm fixated on how lazy I am. You stupid idiot. You didn't get up. You did it again. And I have a lot of regret about that. And that sets the tone for my day. So that's number 1.
And I like this because you're really nice to yourself here. I mean, you're really nice to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I left off. I'm looking at it now. I said, I want to take a long walk off a short bridge.
Yeah.
And not to make light, because it is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month.
Yeah. So
that's like kind of your feeling is like, I don't like myself. I hate myself.
Gotcha. So you're mad at yourself, basically. So there's some level of anger with yourself. Okay.
Exactly. The number 2 is I got up early enough to do my Miracle Morning, but I decided to do work instead. I put work first. I got to answer that. I'll just answer the email. I'll just open up my email, take a look at what's there, then I'll do my Miracle Morning. Yeah, that's a stupid idea. And so I do the work first, and then I get distracted, and then it doesn't get done, and then I'm mad at myself again. So at least I'm getting up, but I'm still not prioritizing the miracle morning. Number three, so this is the neutral. I was able to get up and I started my miracle morning. So miracle morning for me is I read the Daily Stoic, which is a book co-authored. I forget the co-author. Ryan Holiday is one of the co-authors. He's written a whole bunch of other great books on Stoicism. So more show notes stuff, Steve. And it really is a great grounder and anchor in my life and my morning practice here. So I read a little passage from the Daily Stoic, one page, a couple paragraphs, a quote from Marcus Aurelius, generally, and reflect on that. So I do my gratitude. I do at least three things I'm grateful for, if not more, and just write it out, handwrite it. But you can do it however you want. You can dictate it. So there's power in the writing. Then the next is affirmations, and the affirmations have changed over time. And I have a few of them. But to start with, I am a great husband, daddo, that's what my kids call me, friend, son, brother, attorney, and leader and business owner. And then I end it, there's a couple more in between, but I end it with, I am worthy of love and success. And that one's a relatively new addition in the last few months, and that's been extremely powerful for me. So for those of you who are SNL fans, you might remember Stuart Smalley, and it's kind of funny, like, gosh darn it, I'm good enough. But there is power in that, right? So it's funny because it's true. That's why comedy is funny. It is true. So be Stuart Smalley. That's what I do in the morning. And then I journal. And this is important. Every day, it's like a great author, I forget who it was, who said it, like you have to write, I think it was Stephen King, you have to write 500 words a day at least, even if you're not feeling like it. You got to write it. And then that helps you become a better writer. But so it's like, I don't feel like, what do I have to talk to myself about today? Nothing. Well, just start writing, and then stuff comes. It's crazy. It's like a faucet. It just explodes out. But that's important because it connects thoughts in your mind, or free headspace for later. So those are the components of my miracle morning. So number three is I started and I did the daily Stoic reflection, but I had a difficult time coming up with 3 gratitudes, and I didn't journal at all. 4 is I did daily journal, I did my gratitudes, but I didn't do any journaling. And then the last, of course, I hit all marks. So hey, I'm great. I did all these things, and then I've done my miracle morning.
I love it. I love it. So I want to talk about 2 things on this for our listeners. So another place of the journaling, it comes from 2 places. One is the Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, Not the Art of War, which he is a writer, and he talks about how to become a professional writer, is that you have to work past the muse and you have to become a pro. You have to quit being an amateur about things. You have to be a pro. And you have to have this disciplined process for writing. And then I believe the author's named Julia Cameron, and the book, The Artist's Way, which I've followed her practice, which in itself is a morning journaling. And both people suggest to handwrite. Paulo Coelho, who's one of my favorite authors, also suggests handwriting. And Paulo Coelho is unfortunately got some of the problems I have, in that he does all his writing in a soundproof closet with a Macintosh computer not hooked to the internet. And that's how he commits to his writing practice. But all these are writing practices. And what you're trying to do is engage the prefrontal cortex through your writing so that you can process some undefined, unclaimed emotional responses. And I like to call it name it to tame it. You name what's going on in your head to tame what's going on in your head. So I really love this. The affirmations, I have to admit, was something that I thought was woo-woo for a long, long period of time. James Joseph, who's one of our members, has talked, I believe, at the summit about the use of affirmations. I've got other members that talk about affirmations. And I realize that everyone's using affirmations, just some of them are positives and some of them are negative. So your conversation here at the very beginning, like, I want to take a long walk off a short bridge when I'm mad at myself, or your grandmother, Safalata, those are affirmations. Those are just not empowering affirmations. Those are negative affirmations. Or I'm too lazy, I'm too fat, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, so very, very powerful affirmation. Just a lot of people don't see it as an affirmation because they've ingrained it as a habit. Now it's part of their character. So you've told yourself tons and tons and tons of affirmations. What you've had the courage to do is reprogram how you feel about your life and reprogram how you think about your future and reprogram how you think about your happiness and reconstruct what that is to you, which requires courage. And, it's a heavy lift for some people. Some people don't have the courage nor the strength, and sometimes not the support community to do it. So really well done. This is great. I really appreciate this. Anything you want to add before I ask you a couple of follow-up questions?
Just that this concept that guides me to is discipline is freedom. And I heard that from my nephew. My 25-year-old nephew wrote, when my son turned 13, he wrote a message to my son, his cousin, like, these are some things that have really helped me along the way. And one of them was discipline is freedom, which I don't know where he learned that. I can imagine from his parents, knowing who his parents are, but I have that on a card. And I wrote discipline, the equal sign, freedom. And I have that on an index card that literally sits the base of my Mac computer at home. So I look at that every day as a reminder of that these things matter, because even if I don't feel like doing it, or I don't feel like I have the time, or I have this more pressing deadline to do, it doesn't matter. I got to do this first, because if I'm not disciplined, then I'm not going to be successful. That other stuff's going to get done, but it's not likely going to be done well or efficiently if I don't do these things. And these things make me a better person, happier, and in a better mindset. And if I'm trained to do it, then I don't have to think about it. That's the freedom aspect of it. I'm also free from stress. I'm also free from worry. I'm free from these negative affirmations, or naffirmations, if you will, that you're talking about.
I like that term. Did you make that up?
Literally on the spot, Steve.
I love that. Naffirmations. You want to put a trademark behind that one.
Yeah, I know some lawyers help.
You might know some lawyers. I like that one. Okay, so here's my next question for you. If you were to recommend, so someone's listening to this and they're like going, all right, this is probably one of the more interesting and unnerving podcasts that we've had thus far, episodes that we've had thus far, but I might try it. It's kind of a stupid idea, but I might try it. How would you encourage people to get started with this?
It's as simple as just block some time off in someplace quiet, free of distraction, wherever that is for you. Some people, it's a coffee shop. That ambient noise in the background helps you focus, and you're also away from your busy life. I'd get out of the office. I'd find someplace else that's quiet and comfortable for you, and just write down, just brainstorm. Like, what is it that quote unquote makes you happy, right? Nothing can actually make you happy. Let's be clear about that. But that's how we talk about things. So to get started, if it's helpful for you, just make a list of things that make you happy. And that's the giant first step, right? So you have now constructed the happiness zone for yourself of these things. If you are a visual person, Venn diagram the heck out of it. Make all these circles. Here's the circle of one thing that I do that makes me happy. And then you just have a visual, and your goal is that center point where everything converges. And that's what you're looking at. Just spend some time. It doesn't have to be a long time. We do these in Atticus. We do the brainstorming sprints. Literally, you can time yourself. I got 15 minutes to jot it down. Then you have something pushing you just to do it. Then you have that, and that's the first. I think that's the first step. And I can't tell you, what your categories should be. I can't tell you how to define each of those. That's personal. That's for you. But I can help you get started. Then second thing is get a support team. Get somebody that's going to hold you accountable, and be there for you, that you turn to and say, I'm having trouble. Whatever that trouble is. I'm having trouble completing this exercise, developing this scorecard, or I'm having trouble in these areas. You need help. We call it rope teams in Atticus. And just the rope team could be just one other person. It doesn't have to be several people. Benefit if you have more than one. My rope team best rope team in the world. Sorry, guys. Everyone has rope teams. We have the rope team. There's two. There's three of us. So I have two other people that I can.
Well, who's on your rope team? Let's do a quick shout out.
Becky Chalukwa and Matthew Kreider.
Two great people. Just two terrific people.
Awesome. Go rope team. So I have two other people other than my wife, other than my dear friends that, totally get some of the program as far as Atticus, and they're also, lawyers and they have their own practices. So they understand from that perspective. So it doesn't have to be someone in your exact position in life, but somebody that you trust that is not your spouse would be preferable. But if you don't have that person as your spouse, awesome. Right. So that's number two, which is super, super important to just get started and moving forward. And really I think the last, as I already said, is be disciplined. Don't be afraid of the low score. The low score is your friend. And that's why Caroline and tell our kids, who cares about the letter grade in the test? The test is your friend because it's telling you something. It's giving you feedback of where you can improve, what else you need to do. I'd rather get that honest score than some inflated score that's going to make me feel good, but actually not telling me anything. It's not helping me. So the low scores are your friend just as much as the high scores make you feel good. But you have to score yourself, and you have to look at yourself in the mirror. You don't literally have to look at yourself in the mirror like Stuart Smalley, but look at your scorecard and just actually score it. And then that, if you do that and you do it enough times, then all of a sudden it's going to turn into the scorecard that's going to work for you, and you're going to learn and grow from it. And the takeaway, Steve, because I anticipate you asking me, well, what's some of your biggest takeaway from all this, is the action of creating a scorecard is actually going to be so impactful to you. And in some ways, even more so than when you actually have the scorecard and you're doing it. That's still going to be impactful, but it's the learning curve, right? So the initial, if we were to graph out your trajectory of success in this activity, it's the initial jolt up on the graph is you actually creating the scorecard. You're going to learn so much about yourself. And that was my biggest takeaway was, holy cow, I got so much just out of doing the activity. Now I got to actually score myself. But wow, I was not anticipating that. I was not prepared for that. And in my journey of coming out of the hole of depression, that last bit, that when you can see kind of the ledge and coming out of the hole and you're just still too far to reach, you need that extra push. This was the push. In March, when I entered the activity, or it was actually February, I still wasn't in a great place. And that was only 6-7 months ago. And this really accelerated that last piece that I needed. Now, if I had done this a year before, I probably wouldn't have been ready for it, because there's all this other stuff that needed to line up and I needed to do. But this was the last piece.
So I'm listening to you, and I just want to thank you again, because what you've done is brilliant, courageous. The question for you as a listener, and I'm wrestling with this. I don't have an answer for it. I may go talk to ChatGPT about it. But what if your lack of happiness in life, your lack of joy in life, your lack of contentment in life is due to unmet, unstated, unclear expectations in your own mind, heart, and head? So what you've done is that you've taken these unmet, and in some cases, unstated expectations. Look, I know most of the source of frustrations in my life have been unmet expectations. And those unmet expectations sometimes were unclear to me. Like I wasn't aware, like I was unaware. I see this happen all the time with lawyers managing their teams. I'm like, well, did you communicate your expectation of how that should work? No, they should just know. That's not a communicated expectation. So you having a conversation with yourself about what's my expectation look like, and unearthing, like an archaeological dig, unearthing in your heart and soul how happiness shows up, is in itself a very fun, cool, and brave inquiry. And now you have a very powerful practice. And I would imagine that it takes typically 30 days to 90 days to anchor a habit. And I think some people are habitually miserable. I've met a lot. What I think you're going to be able to do is habitually make yourself a joyful person through these practices. So I think what you've done here is profound. I hope that people who listen to this particular episode can appreciate the gift that you gave them today and the thinking that you've done and the price that you paid to get where you're at, so that nobody else will have to kind of go through that experience. So really well done, my friend. Anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
That if anyone who's listening or watching this on YouTube, you would like to chat with me, totally open to that. So if there's a way to put that in show notes, how to get in touch with me, my email, then just email me. I'm happy to go offline, have a conversation. If that's something that you're interested in, just the offer is there. I am very open and I want to thank you, Steve, as well, and your team for providing the space for me to be able to have this conversation. While maybe it comes across, if you're listening to this, that Kevin's well-spoken, he's very open, that it's still very difficult to open up about this. And it's only because I have had lots of other opportunities too, like at Atticus with our DYM. I kind of previewed this a couple of weeks ago when I opened up to the group about my challenges, and we've been open about that earlier this year. And it's still not easy because of the kind of the view that people have of just professionals or just people in life. We're the Facebook generation. Everything's good. Or the Instagram generation. Everything's great. Look at me. Everything's great. And we don't realize that we're actually doing that when we're posting it. Some people do it on purpose. But even if you don't, you're just like, I just want to share this. This is awesome. It makes me feel good to share it. But you're only showing that good side of you. And we're in a culture where here in the United States, at least, we're just not open about a lot of the other personal things, mental health, even though it's on vogue to talk about it. It's like, oh, this athlete is going through it, this person, celebrity, whatever. We still haven't reached the level where it is really comfortable for the average person to talk about it. And so it's still very uncomfortable for me to go out and talk about it, because there's still a little part of me is like, what's that other person going to think of me? What is the listeners going to think of me that I don't know? They don't know me. I know you, Steve. I know your team. I know the Atticus community is a very safe place. But I want to just thank you. I'm grateful for you for allowing me, and I would say encourage me in the sense that you didn't seek me out and say, hey, you should do this. You provided an invitation and a space, and it wasn't, hey, I want you to in the seat. It was an invitation. And because I feel so comfortable in the space that you and your team have made, it allowed me to have this conversation and in a seemingly, hopefully, easy manner. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having the courage to do it. So we'll put the scorecard in the show notes, Kevin's information in the show notes should you want to reach out to him. And I just want to encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're wrestling, and sometimes as a lawyer or team leader or what have you, you might be in a resentful place, and you might be resenting your law practice. You might be resenting some of the choices that you've made. Resentment is a terrible poison that will start to eat you from the inside out. So if you're in an abusive relationship with your law firm, I would encourage you to take a step back and look at what Kevin's done. And while you may be thinking, oh, well, that's just a simple, silly kind of thing, if you actually take a step back and strategically look at this, I'm going to predict a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to predict that 10 years from now, Kevin will be annoyingly happy if he continues this practice. Two, Kevin will have more business than he knows what to do with, because most lawyers are not really enjoyable to work with. So Kevin's going to be a nicer, more pleasant, a more interesting human being to most of his referral sources, most of his clients. He's going to end up with these practices being a strong leader for his family and a strong leader in our community. These are foundational core practices that allow anyone to build a foundation for their future. So Kevin, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And is any last words of wisdom before we call it?
Be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. And
beautiful.
That's what leads my life.
Beautiful. Be gentle. I think you need to change that one column, though, where you're really talking harsh if we're going to be gentle with ourselves. I'm just saying we might
Always
be
room for improvement.
version 5.0, my friend. All right. With that, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.